Rain lashed against the grimy window pane, the wind howling like a banshee outside my dingy hotel room. Salt spray stung my face as I peered out, the blurry neon lights of the waterfront district reflecting on the slick pavement below. This wasn't my usual scene. I, Detective Miller, was a creature of habit, content with the predictable grit of New York City streets. Now, I was in Innsmouth, a decaying coastal town clinging desperately to the ragged cliffs overlooking a churning, unforgiving sea. The mayor, a nervous wreck of a man with clammy hands and perpetually bloodshot eyes, had called me in. A string of disappearances, all seemingly unconnected, had the townsfolk spooked. Fishermen vanishing without a trace, their boats found bobbing empty in the choppy waters. A reclusive lighthouse keeper gone without a whimper. There was a palpable unease clinging to the town like the stench of rotten fish, a secret everyone knew, but no one dared speak of. Armed with a healthy dose of skepticism and a flask filled with something stronger than seawater, I started my investigation. The locals were tight-lipped, their eyes flickering with a strange mixture of fear and defiance whenever I pressed them about the disappearances. The police force, a gaggle of mismatched uniforms with a collective IQ barely breaking double digits, offered little help. Days bled into nights, the persistent drizzle soaking my trench coat to the bone. I combed through dusty archives at the ramshackle library, the only source of historical information in this forsaken town. The deeper I dug, the more unsettling the picture became. Innsmouth, it seemed, had a dark history. Whispers of an ancient cult, worshipping a forgotten god, a creature of the deep that demanded appeasement. Ridiculous stuff, the kind of rumors that sprout in isolated communities with too much time on their hands and too much cheap rum in their bellies. Or was it? One night, fueled by frustration and a gut feeling that refused to be ignored, I stumbled upon a hidden cove tucked away at the far end of the harbor. The air here hung heavy, charged with a strange energy that prickled the hairs on my arms. Half buried beneath the sand, weathered and worn, lay a series of crude carvings depicting grotesque, otherworldly figures. The closer I looked, the more the images seemed to writhe and pulsate, an optical illusion caused by the flickering moonlight and my exhaustion, I told myself. Suddenly, a guttural chant echoed from the shadows, a sound that sent chills down my spine. A group of figures materialized from the darkness, shrouded in dark robes, their faces hidden beneath grotesque masks. Panic clawed at my throat as I realized these weren't some drunken sailors spouting drunken tales. These were believers, their eyes glinting with a fanatical zeal. They apprehended me before I could even reach for my gun, dragging me deeper into the cove. The chanting grew louder, punctuated by the rhythmic thud of a giant drum echoing from somewhere out at sea. A sickly sweet scent filled the air, a mix of incense and something decidedly more organic, a decaying stench that made my stomach churn. They pushed me towards a crude altar, a monstrous idol rising from the sand behind it. The idol resembled nothing I'd ever seen, a grotesque amalgamation of tentacles and teeth, its single eye glowing with an unnatural light. As the chanting reached a crescendo, the cultists pushed me forward, shoving a ceremonial dagger into my hand. My mind raced. Was this it? Was I about to become another sacrifice to this monstrous entity they worshipped? I wouldn't go down without a fight. But what good was a detective's badge against a god from the depths? The ceremonial dagger felt cold and slick in my sweaty palm. My vision tunneled, the chanting morphing into a maddening drone. One of the cultists, a wiry man with a face etched by fervor, grabbed my arm, his eyes burning with manic devotion. "Join us, detective," he rasped, his voice rough with salt and fanaticism. "Embrace the drowned one and be reborn." Reborn? The word echoed in the vast emptiness of my mind. I looked around, desperation fueling a sliver of defiance. These weren't monsters, not exactly. They were just scared, lost souls clinging to a twisted faith in exchange for a sense of security in this unforgiving world. But I wasn't one for blind faith. "This thing you worship," I croaked, my voice barely audible over the chanting. "It takes, doesn't it? It demands sacrifices." The cultist flinched, a flicker of doubt momentarily crossing his feverish gaze. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could answer, a tremor shook the ground. The chanting faltered, replaced by a collective gasp as everyone turned towards the churning sea. A colossal shape emerged from the depths, its silhouette monstrous and vaguely familiar. It wasn't the idol, not exactly, but a grotesque parody of it, a living embodiment of the nightmares depicted in the carvings. The glowing eye on its pulsating head scanned the cove, settling on me with a terrifying intensity. In that split second, everything clicked. These weren't sacrifices to appease the drowned one. They were offerings, fuel for a monstrous entity that slumbered beneath the waves, a being kept at bay by these twisted rituals. Fear turned to a cold, desperate resolve. I wouldn't be part of their sick offering. With an adrenaline-fueled lunge, I shoved the wiry cultist aside, sending the ceremonial dagger clattering across the sand. Pandemonium erupted. The cultists, enraged by my defiance, lunged towards me, but my mind was already racing. I snatched a burning torch from a nearby brazier, the flames licking at my fingers. "You want a sacrifice?" I roared, my voice hoarse but resolute. "Take this!" I hurled the blazing torch at the idol, the flames catching on the dry wood and fabric draped around it. The cultists faltered, momentarily stunned. I used the opportunity to break free, weaving through the startled figures. The night echoed with enraged screams as the flames spread, engulfing the idol. The drowned one in the distance let out a deafening bellow, a sound that shook the very foundation of the cove. Debris rained down as the chanting turned into a chorus of panicked shrieks. I didn't look back. I sprinted towards the darkness, the flames from the burning idol casting long, grotesque shadows behind me. Whether the fire would destroy the idol or merely anger the drowned one further, I didn't know. But for now, it was my only hope. The rain had stopped, replaced by an eerie calm. The storm clouds had parted, revealing an inky black sky dotted with a million cold, indifferent stars. Reaching the harbor, I spotted my car, a beacon of hope in the desolate landscape. I threw myself behind the wheel, slamming the door shut and starting the engine. The roar of the engine was music to my ears as I peeled out of the cove, leaving the burning altar, the frantic cultists, and the monstrous awakening behind. As I sped away from Innsmouth, the faint glow of the burning idol visible in my rearview mirror, a single question gnawed at me. What had I truly unleashed? Had I saved the town from a grotesque entity or merely enraged it further, dooming them all? The answer, like the churning sea beyond the cliffs, remained a mystery, a chilling secret I now carried within me. The drive back to New York was a blur. Every creak of the car, every rustle of leaves outside my window sent chills down my spine. Sleep was a stranger, haunted by visions of the drowned one's pulsating eye and the panicked faces of the cultists. Reaching the familiar grime of my city was a strange comfort, like a homecoming after a descent into hell. My report to the Innsmouth police chief was met with disbelief, then nervous dismissal. They wanted nothing to do with the ramblings of a jaded detective with a taste for cheap whiskey. Unsatisfied, I sought out experts, academics specializing in obscure cults and forgotten religions. Days turned into weeks, my frustration mounting with every dead end. Then, one rainy afternoon, a package arrived on my doorstep. Inside, a leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age and filled with strange symbols. A note scrawled on the flyleaf. For Detective Miller, who may understand more than he realizes. The book, it turned out, was a forbidden text, detailing the history of the Drowned One, a slumbering entity from the deepest trenches of the ocean. Apparently, cultists across different eras had worshipped it, their rituals keeping it at bay. It mentioned Innsmouth as one of these strongholds, chosen due to its proximity to a ley line, a conduit for the entity's power. The book described the Drowned One in horrifying detail, a being of pure chaos and hunger, driven by an insatiable desire to consume all life. And the worst part? The fire wouldn't have destroyed the idol. It would have angered the Drowned One, a temporary setback at best. Sleep became an even rarer commodity. The weight of the knowledge pressed down on me, the fate of Innsmouth, and potentially the whole world, hanging in the balance. I spent days poring over the arcane text, searching for a weakness, a ritual not of appeasement, but of banishment. Weeks later, I found a faint glimmer of hope. The ritual required rare artifacts mentioned only in whispers throughout the book. One, a shard of a meteorite rumored to hold the essence of a long-dead star, was said to be housed in a forgotten museum across the globe. Another, a chalice carved from a mythical creature's unblemished bone, was said to rest in the depths of a forgotten tomb in a war-torn country. The journey ahead was perilous, a desperate gamble against an awakening monster. I cashed out my retirement fund, pawned my meager belongings, and started preparing. This wasn't just about saving Innsmouth anymore. It was about containing a cosmic horror, a responsibility I never sought but couldn't escape. As I boarded the first plane out of that grimy city, the image of the Drowned One's pulsating eye flashed in my mind. It was a cold, uncaring eye, devoid of intelligence or emotion. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a fight against a monstrous entity. It was a battle against the indifferent, all-consuming chaos that lurked at the fringes of reality. This was detective work redefined, with the fate of the world hanging in the balance,